Imagine trying to build the world's largest democracy literally from the ground up. You wouldn't just need a list of rules. You'd need a meticulously crafted, incredibly balanced architectural blueprint. Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're opening up that exact blueprint, the Indian Constitution. And we aren't just going to look at it as some dry, dusty historical rulebook. Instead, we're exploring the dynamic, living pillars that balance the massive power of the state right alongside your personal freedom. To help us navigate, we're going to cover the blueprint of democracy itself, the citizen's shield of rights, our compass of duties, the state's map of directives, how those rights and directives clash, and finally, the unshakable basic structure holding the whole shebang together. But hey, before we dive in, there's a word you absolutely need to know. Justiciable. Right. It sounds like legal jargon, but it's a total game changer. If a right is justiciable, it's got teeth. Meaning, if that right gets violated, you can literally march straight into a court of law and demand they enforce it. Keep that concept in the back of your mind because it's the exact dividing line between what the government must do and what the government should do. Okay, let's jump right into Part 1, the Citizen's Shield, otherwise known as fundamental rights. You'll find these right in Part 3 of the Constitution, from Articles 12 through 35. Think of them as your ultimate shield, specifically designed to guard your freedom, equality, and dignity from any kind of overreach. And they're grouped into 6 main buckets. We've got the right to equality, which completely abolishes untouchability. The right to freedom, protecting your life, your speech, and your liberty. There's the right against exploitation, strictly banning things like forced labor and human trafficking. Then we have the right to freedom of religion, cultural and educational rights to protect minorities, and finally, the right to constitutional remedies. Now, that last category is absolutely crucial. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chief architect of the whole Constitution, passionately called Article 32 the heart and soul of the Constitution. Why? Well, because a right doesn't actually mean much if you can't back it up, right? Article 32 is completely justiciable. It basically gives you, the citizen, the direct power to go straight to the Supreme Court if your fundamental protections are ever breached. It's literally the shield that protects all the other shields. Actually, fun fact, the blueprint wasn't always exactly like this. We used to have a 7th category, the right to property. But, to balance individual wealth with national development, it was pulled out of the fundamental rights back in 1978 by the 44th Amendment. It still exists today, sure, but just as a regular legal right under Article 300A. So no way is it part of that elite, hyper-protected club anymore. Moving right along to Section 2, the Citizen's Compass, or Fundamental Duties. So if you get this incredible shield of rights, what's your responsibility in return? Well, these duties actually weren't in the original draft. They were added later to Part 4A in 1976, guided by the Sworn Singh Committee. Today, we have 11 of these moral obligations, and they really act like a compass. Notice how they group into these vital themes, like patriotism, where you respect the flag and defend the country, or social responsibility, promoting harmony and brotherhood. They even mandate protecting the environment, lakes, wildlife, and striving for excellence. Oh, and providing education for kids, which was specifically added in 2002. Now, they aren't legally enforceable the same way your rights are, but they are absolutely essential for keeping the country united. All right, let's flip the perspective in Section 3, the state's map, directive principles of state policy. Shifting from the citizen over to the government itself, we land in Part 4. If rights protect the individual, these directives are basically a giant map guiding the state. The ultimate goal here, establish a welfare state, reduce economic inequality, and promote social justice. But remember our vocabulary word from earlier? These are non-justiciable. You cannot sue the government if they fail to achieve them. They're more like objectives, classified into 3 distinct branches. First, socialist principles, aim for economic fairness. Think equal pay for equal work. Second, Gandhian principles translate Mahatma Gandhi's vision into policy, pushing for village panchayats and rural development. And finally, liberal intellectual principles look forward, promoting things like international peace and a uniform civil code. It's a comprehensive map for a better society. So what happens when we put them head to head? That's Section 4, rights versus directives. This is where the balancing act of Indian democracy really shines. Fundamental rights are justiciable. The courts will absolutely enforce them for you. Directives, not enforceable. The goal of your rights is to protect individual freedom, while directives are aiming for the broader social and economic welfare. But the coolest distinction is the obligation they create. Rights put a negative obligation on the state, meaning they tell the government, hey, you cannot do this to a person. Directives, on the other hand, are positive directions, telling the state, here's what you should be doing for the people. It's this constant, delicate dance between personal liberty and the public good.
And that brings us to the grand finale, Section 5, the unshakable basic structure.
So, Parliament has the power to amend a constitution, right? They need to keep up with changing times. But what if a government tried to use that amendment power to completely bulldoze the blueprint? What if they tried to erase fundamental rights entirely just to push their directives through? Well, enter one of the most monumental legal battles in world history, Keshavananda Bharati versus the state of Kerala, decided back in 1973. The outcome of this single case permanently changed how the Constitution is protected, creating an ultimate failsafe. Out of that 1973 case came the basic structure doctrine. The Supreme Court made a truly profound ruling. They basically said, yes, Parliament, you can absolutely amend the Constitution. However, you do not have the power to destroy its fundamental identity. There is a basic structure to this blueprint that is 100% off limits, no matter how massive a majority the government might hold. So what exactly is in this unshakable foundation? The Supreme Court identified a few absolute non-negotiables. We're talking the sheer supremacy of the Constitution itself, the rule of law, the separation of powers, an independent judiciary. It locks in the federal character of the nation, secularism, free and fair elections, and, yep, the core protection of your fundamental rights. These are the foundation stones that prevent the misuse of power, making sure those original democratic values remain intact forever. Which leaves us with a pretty massive question. We've explored the citizen's shield of rights, the compass of duties, the state's map, and this unbreakable basic structure holding it all together. But blueprints exist in the real world, and the real world shifts and changes constantly. As India continues to evolve economically, socially, and technologically, how is this delicate balance going to adapt? How will that tension between your personal freedoms and the state's welfare hold up against the changing tides of the future? It's definitely something to ponder as you look at the world's largest democracy in action. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.